So today I'm going to talk about trauma. It's a big subject. It has effects on a small scale and a big scale. And today I just want to take a little time to kind of just off the cuff, just talk about trauma, what it means, what it looks like, and why we all experience it. I'm Ketra Thompson, and I'm a certified master hypnotist and a life recovery coach. If you'd like to be notified every time I post a new video, then be sure to hit like, hit subscribe. And I also want to mention that in the description of this video is a link for a complimentary consultation if you'd like to find out more about what you can do to get your life back on track and what you can do to work with me. So check that all out there. So, trauma is a really popular topic right now, and for good reason, because trauma affects us on a very deep level, and it's something we can carry throughout our entire life, affecting our behavior patterns, affecting our relationships, affecting how we connect with other people, affecting how we communicate, affecting the decisions we make, our ability to have empathy, all of it. So first, I want to look at the fact that, in my opinion, the United States was built on trauma. So just think about it for a minute. You've got all of these immigrants coming over from other countries. They are leaving behind all of their family, all of their customs, all of their traditions, all of their hometowns, all of the deep-rooted connections that they had from their upbringing and their life. And they're coming over to this country where everyone feels kind of isolated. And you oftentimes had groups that would stick together, from the countries they were from when they did immigrate into the United States, because it felt most comfortable. It felt most at home to be with people who spoke your language, who knew the background. But nevertheless, they were very traumatized by having to leave those situations. And I want to mention in the midst of this, the attachment bond need of human beings. We really need to be attached. We need to be part of something. And that attachment starts when we're young, really young. If a baby doesn't have the right nurturing, it could very well die. Human babies are so dependent on their caregiver that they have the strongest need in them is to have an attachment bond, because that attachment bond helps them be safe. We carry that attachment bond need into our adult life. And now when you've got people leaving behind everything they knew and their culture, you've got some level of attachment trauma in just moving to a new country. But especially back then, people weren't staying connected in any way. You left and you may never see them again for the rest of your life. So there's a lot of trauma that happened just from that. Then you add on, we've got the slave issue in America. You've got the Civil War issue where the same country's fighting against itself. And we're talking about a really young nation still. And so you have all of this trauma, all of this abuse. And it's like it's at the core of who we are in this nation, is a trauma-filled nation that hasn't healed yet. Now, it doesn't mean we're not on the path to healing or that we can't heal. It just means that enough people haven't had the awareness and growth needed to heal from the trauma that's been inflicted on them or around them or culturally or systematically or individually. And so trauma is just this big issue. So now I want to look at a little smaller scale. So what does trauma look like in a home, in a small environment like that? Well, trauma at home can be emotional abuse or neglect, being belittled, bullied, or picked on, even in your own home as a child or a spouse to someone who is inflicting these things on you. It can also be an issue if your physical or sexual safety is not something that you have in your home, especially as a small child, but even as an adult. If you're living in constant fear of your physical or sexual safety, that's going to create some serious lasting trauma. The other thing is love and affection being withheld. We are beings that are meant to be connected. We're meant to give and receive love in a mutual way. And when that is withheld chronically in your childhood or in a committed relationship or marriage, that creates trauma in the heart of the person who's being neglected. Of course, if you're in a really toxic relationship with someone narcissistic or had a narcissistic parent, then you're going to be subjected to bullying, manipulation, guilt trips, gaslighting, all kinds of things that really wear down your self-worth and create a lot of chaos and confusion in your mind. And the other thing that I want to mention about childhood trauma in a home is no teachable moments. When a parent isn't taking the time to nurture that child, give them those teachable moments, explain why something is the way that it is, and really cultivate a sense of understanding in a safe, effective way, that child is left to try to figure things out on their own, and they are forced to draw conclusions and assumptions based on what they're seeing around them with no discernment to really be able to see if the conclusions they're drawing are correct. And so sometimes it's not the things that happen to you, it's the things that don't happen to you. If children aren't nurtured and aren't cared for, and parents don't take those teachable moments to really help grow them up into functional adults, then it is neglect, and it's very painful and it's very traumatic. So what do we end up with? We can end up with people who have no awareness that these things are driving their behavior. They become adults that are still trying to prove something to someone. They're still trying to be accepted by their parent, and maybe sometimes even a dead parent. It's like they want so badly to do all the things that that parent wanted them to do so they can finally feel loved and accepted, so they can finally hear the words, "I'm proud of you." And they have sometimes very little awareness that they're doing it. They created a core belief around that, and that belief is driving their behavior. And so they're still longing to have that acceptance from a parent or the person that really did that damage or had that neglectful behavior toward them. And so they carry that through into adulthood, not realizing that they're actually perpetuating the same damage onto other people that was done to them because they are just so desperately trying to become something, so they don't feel drowned in that shame of not being what someone told them they needed to be. The other way we tend to try to redeem our past is by getting into a similar situation and then secretly, almost unknowingly, trying to create the good fairy tale outcome that we didn't get the first time. So we can end up staying in toxic or narcissistic relationships far too long. You've got trauma bonds going on that make that hard and confusing to get out of. But you might also have this narrative that says, this time I can fix it. This time I'll do everything right. This time I can change things. And this time I can get the outcome that I always wanted. It's like that fairy tale. They want the Cinderella story, and they're just going to keep fighting for it because that little child inside them desperately wants it. People can also tend to do this by obsessive controlling behavior, thinking that they can control the other person and fit them into the perfect narrative of who they thought they should be. And this happens a lot with all kinds of situations, but especially if you're dealing with someone who tends to be like especially toxic in a relationship, afraid of vulnerability and creating a lot of chaos and criticism. It's because they've created a narrative for their partner that they're supposed to be this perfect person that they have figured out long before they met them. They're supposed to have certain thoughts and certain behaviors and dress a certain way and fit a certain mold. And humans don't do that. And so they try to control more and more. And so all of this control is also an attempt to get the happy ending that they didn't get as a kid, to get this narrative that they think is going to save them, that they think is going to be, the one magic pill. So you can see that this is a pattern that can go on and on, especially when you're talking about generations who have been traumatized, not dealt with it, done the same thing to their kids, they're traumatized, not dealt with it, they do similar things to their kids, they're traumatized, and at some point, someone has to stop. Someone has to stop long enough to be self-reflective. They have to sit with themselves long enough to listen to themselves, to feel their feelings, to acknowledge any of that pain, and then to do the deep work of reframing what they think, feel, and believe about these things so they can live a different life, so they can behave differently toward their kids, toward their spouse, toward their employees, toward their friends, so they can create a different life for themselves. And that's why hypnotherapy is so impactful. It is the one way that you have access to your subconscious mind later in life so that you can go back. You can discover the root cause. You can reframe your core belief around that so that you can find the inner healing and really connect to yourself. Because so many people are just going through life, doing the same things, expecting different results. They don't get it. And they're wanting to be loved and accepted. They're wanting to be included because we have such an innate need to be connected. Yet if they are living in fear, they're also terrified of it. So you've got this dynamic where some people really want the connection, they crave it, and they try to pull it in, and then they push it out because they're terrified, they don't want to be vulnerable. What if they get rejected again? But when you have done the work, when you're connected to your self-worth, when you know that you have always been worthy, you have always been lovable, and nothing and no one could take that away from you, then you can love freely. Then you can give openly. Then you can accept that you have flaws and you aren't as judgmental with yourself, and you're also not as judgmental with others when that happens. When you understand that we're all human, that we all make mistakes, and that the key about mistakes is that they're a great learning opportunity. They're an opportunity to make our life different. And so if you've reached that point where you are aware that your life is out of alignment, it's not what it should be, it's not where it needs to be, your relationships are a wreck, you're isolated, you're alone, you're numbed out, you aren't feeling anything, any of those things where you just know something has to change, and that something is your subconscious mind. It's what's running the show. It's all of those belief systems that got created and locked into there, and they didn't get created in truth. They got created by life circumstance, by generational trauma that gets passed down. And so trauma is truly at the core of all kinds of things. All addictions are an attempt to numb out the pain of unresolved trauma. All unwanted behaviors that are damaging to relationships or damaging to yourself are the result of unincorporated, unhealed, internal trauma. So when you're ready, set up that consultation. I'd love to talk to you about how you can finally become free from this, how you can finally connect to your truest, highest self. Because when you change yourself, you do change the world. So until next time, curate a life by your own design.